one thing to remember is the conditions are quite varied. They affect different age groups in different ways. It's really important to remember that everything we cover may not be directly relevant to every single patient. So just bear that in mind as we describe things through the session. Next slide. So this is just to indicate that the way we activate our voluntary muscles, the muscles over which we have voluntary control, basically when you have a thought, it sends an electrical signal from your brain down your spine into a nerve, and that electrical signal travels along the nerve and sends electricity into the muscle to make the muscle contract. And that complicated process of electrical signaling and what we call excitation of the muscle is very dependent on ion channels. And so the muscle channelopathies are where the ion channels in the muscle are not working quite correctly, usually because of a genetic reason. And that can cause different symptoms where the muscles are either too stiff or too weak. And that's the main subject of today. Next slide. So what is a muscle channelopathy? So I've tried to explain it a little bit. So this diagram is like the surface of a muscle fiber, and it located within the surface or the membrane are proteins which have little kind of pores in them, and these are what the ion channels are, and they let different salts enter or leave the muscle, so things like sodium, potassium, calcium, and it's the movement of these, what we call ions, through the channels that are really important in the electrical signals being conducted properly and enabling normal muscle contraction and relaxation. It's these different channels that might go wrong in muscle channelopathies. And as I say, that's usually because of a change in the gene. All genes make proteins. There are genes that make these channel proteins. And if the gene's got a change in its genetic code, then the channel isn't made quite right and it doesn't work properly. Next slide. So we're focusing on muscle channelopathies, but this is just to highlight that there's all sorts of channels in all different places in the nervous system. And we now recognize there are brain channelopathies, there are cerebellar, the cerebellum's that green back part of the brain, cerebellar channelopathies, but we're focusing on the muscle channelopathies. But we actually study all of these at Queen Square. Next slide. So we have a really fantastic team that it's my privilege to work with. You're going to hear from all the different members of the team throughout the day. But just running through quickly, Deepa is co-leads the service with me. Arjun is one of the consultant neurophysiologists. Natalie is the clinical nurse specialist. Vino is our excellent clinical research fellow. Sarah and Nicola, specialist physiotherapists. Jean is crucial for the whole service to run properly. Richa is key for genetics. Rupi works in the lab to study the electrical properties of channels that helps us in our diagnostic service. Pinky is key for the pediatric part of the service, and Shan also for the pediatric service as a specialist nurse, and then there's Ivana, who's our research specialist nurse. So it's a great team, and we're all pleased to present to you today, and you'll hopefully interact with all of us. Next slide. So finally, just to kind of highlight that this is quite unusual in that we're the only centre in the country that's commissioned directly by the NHS, so-called highly specialized commissioning, to see and assess patients with possible muscle channelopathies. So any GP or any doctor anywhere in the country can refer a patient to us without any local cost implication, because we are centrally funded. And this is the only service funded for this purpose by the NHS in this country. And our service involves, can sometimes be telephone advice to doctors locally. It can be receiving samples of blood for DNA analysis, or it can be seeing the patient and assessing the patient and the family actually at our centre. So there's a range of different things we can offer. And in our diagnostic approaches to getting the diagnosis right for patients, we have a whole range of things we do, which is clinically assess the patient, do specialist electrical measurements, do genetics, and also then study in detail if we find new genetic changes to be sure if they're causing the problem or not. And then there are a range of treatments that we can discuss for all of these conditions, and you're going to hear about all of this through the day. Next slide. So that's my introduction. You're going to hear in more detail about different elements of what I've talked about, as I say, and just want to stress again, your feedback and your views are very important in shaping our service and our research.